For those of you who are starting chapter 2, I am Sue Swalwell, an obsessive family historian and one-namer, but I seem to have turned myself into a one-placer too, even though I have yet to register for a one-place study. As the 40th anniversary of the sale of my childhood home Holywell farm approached in 2022, it seemed an appropriate time to turn my attention from people to place and research the history of the farm I grew up on and see if there was any truth in the story my granddad told me. That story was that the water we drank on the farm came from the same well used by the naughty nuns of Abbey that lived here before Henry VIII got rid of their priory. This talk is therefore a brief history of Holywell Farm in South Loftus, North Yorkshire, and it will be told in 3 chapters over the course of this event. During the talk, I will share some of the discoveries made and highlight some of the records that have helped me to reveal that story. Today, the focus is on the story of how the farm emerged from the land. Just a quick reminder of the geography of the place. Loftus lies in the northeast corner of North Yorkshire and is a divided parish. Holywell Farm lies in South Loftus, or Loftus Australis, as it was sometimes referred to in early parish registers. The town of Loftus was once famous for its wool fair, but that lies in North Loftus. The foundations of Loftus, as it was known by the Swalwells, was laid down by their landlords, the Nuns.A family, who held the land for 200 years. In that time, the farming, landscape, the architecture of the town and the industrial profile of the place changed fundamentally, all of which the Nuns.A family were central to. The family acquired the land and estate in 1763 from the Moore family, adding it to their existing estates. They invested in the town. They improved the living accommodation of those who lived in Loftus, providing gardens and allotments so that the population could rear pigs, keep a cow, and grow their own food to sustain their families, and importantly, to keep racing pigeons. As landlords, they were great record keepers, and thankfully those records have been donated to the North Yorkshire County Record Office. Other families relevant to this project have done this too. This collection isn't restricted purely to their tenure as owners of the land at South Loftus, but it contains the records of previous owners too. Their archives contain title deeds that extend back beyond the establishment of the North Riding Registry of Deeds, which commenced in 1736, and through to the era of the bequests in the 1500s. The estate papers include field books, rental rolls, and valuation surveys, all of which, combined with census records, have allowed me to track the occupiers of the land at Holywell and its neighbours back to 1774. The plan at the top of the page, and yes, I know it's upside down, is taken from the estate records in the early part of the 20th century. The footprint of the farm back to the early 1800s is broadly similar, but it does show an evolution in its layout, which reflects changes in agricultural practices and thinking. For example, the addition of a wheel shed. There is one problem though. It is impossible to say from these maps how many stories each of the buildings were, and therefore when the farmhouse I knew as a child took shape. I suspect though that initially it may have been a thatched longhouse, which was common in the area, and many were amended and extended into a stone and tile farmhouse. The field names found in maps such as this tithe map for Loftus can provide clues too. In this one there is a field called Old House Field, which suggests there was a different building in a different location on this section of land before the current farmhouse, although I've not been able to identify it yet. It also demonstrates the longevity of some field names, as some of these titles were used when as a child I was given instructions to take the 10 o'clocks and the 3 o'clocks over to the field where the work was being done. Some of the maps have specific purposes. This shows a plan from 1807 to improve the drainage of the farms. Unfortunately, it doesn't extend as far as Andale for me to identify whether the wells were connected. The Dundas family were keen to increase the productivity of this land. They also had a strict crop rotation policy that their tenant farmers had to follow or face penalties. It also details a plan to plant trees and move this landscape closer to its modern day form. An earlier map shows a different form of farming, when sundry people had gates or butts within an open field system. Many of those sundry tenants are recalled in the field names of 1774. Over time, these field names changed, with surname-based ones reducing and descriptive names becoming more common. But they can provide valuable clues about previous tenants and also about the previous landscape. So the Dundas family created the farm and perhaps named it Holywell from the house's original location. The Walkers appear to have changed its name from Holywell to Holywell in the early 1800s, perhaps because there was a resurgence of interest in the history of Andale Abbey at the time, because 16 skeletons were found on the land there then. I think Grandad was telling tales. This tree of the Moore family is solely built from the information found in the title deeds collection of the Zetland and Luss archive, and it does include the copies of the wills that are there too. This family, the Moore family, bought the two manors of Loftus together, having bought South Loftus Manor from Roger Beckwith in 1733. The family were involved in the alum industry, and it is said that it is what their riches were built upon, but there were some very advantageous marriages made too within this family, notably that of Zachary Stewart Moore and Anne Harnage, a very rich heiress. The deeds and the estate records reveal a story of the acquisition, mortgage and loss of land in South Loftus by the Moore family. It was their son, Zachary Harnage Moore, who lost the South Loftus lands to the Dundas family. According to depositions made in one Chancery Court case, the acquisitions made were not always wise ones. Their interest in the land does not appear to have been agricultural, but rather related to the access of fuel for the processing of their alum. There were mortgages too, and significant ones. Some of those may also be due to the money needed to support their alum business as mining on the cliffs of North Loftus. Certainly had its advantages, but it also had its problems. The locals, however, didn't think it was his lack of business nous that brought his downfall. They believe it was his lifestyle. After all, Zachary Harnage Moore was the man who, in local legend, shod his horses with silver horseshoes and cared so little about the expense that if the horse lost one of the shoes, he wouldn't even turn round to retrieve it. He also belonged to a club, the northern equivalent of the Hellfire Club, led by John Hall Stevenson of Skelton Castle, who were famed for their outrageous and extravagant parties, and even alleged to have been involved in devil worship. A fellow guest at those parties was the author Lawrence Sterne, and it is said that this group of men were the inspiration for his book Tristram Shandy. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Zachary ended up spending time in Marshalsea prison following 2 King's Bench cases brought against him for debt. The court ruling was that his lands were to be sold to pay that debt, and the Dundas era began. This is an era of tenant farmers and contrasting landlords. It was a period that saw the land of South Loftus improved and made more productive, and a period where agricultural thinking was evolving, new machinery was developing, and the productivity of the land became a key interest for farmers and their landlords. Agricultural societies were formed, agricultural shows began, and new breeds of livestock developed, such as the Cleveland ox and the Cleveland bay. It was from this cultural and societal change that Holywell Farm emerged, and why competing and attending the local agricultural shows was such an important part of my childhood. In the next chapter of this story, I will be telling you about what the court records can reveal about this community in South Loftus. Certainly, Zachary Harnage Moore was by no means the only one to appear in a court case.